guys, welcome back to ASMR Money Mentor. I hope you've had a really great day. I hope you are relaxing and ready for hopefully an educational video for you today. My name's Evan Thomas and I'm the host of ASMR Money Mentor, and I'm so glad that you guys are here. Now, before we start today's episode, I want to remind you to go back and watch a couple episodes as a prerequisite to today's episode. The one where I had bonus and it said balances, and the other one said my budget for 2024, because I think having that foundational knowledge going into today's episode is imperative. And enjoy today's episode, where we're going to be talking about how to spend your money in advance. And you may be wondering, Evan, what are you talking about? Spending your money in advance. Well, back in 2005, when I was really starting to learn about personal finance, I took some time and I developed what I call a build a budget spreadsheet, because I really wanted to see the entire year of my finances and not just 1 month. So I know that for many of you, if you're just starting out with finance, personal finance, I should say, you may be struggling just to get through the week or the month, and I completely understand that. That was me for so many years, as you guys know. I had what I call my survival years for like 10 or 11 years before I started to make a little bit more money that I could put into saving and investing. And that's what we're talking about today, is how you can ultimately get there, because I think that's the goal, as you know, to build an engine that can sustain us years into the future when we're not working. But back in 2005, I took some time and I thought, Evan, why don't you create a spreadsheet that would have all of your money coming in and all of the money going out, and it would then net to zero? Because if something nets to zero, I thought to myself, I could never go wrong. So I'm going to bring up a spreadsheet on the screen here in front of you in just a moment, because I want you to see my 2024 budget that began in January of this year. Now, this doesn't matter if you're watching this video in the future. It also doesn't matter if you want to start your budget like now at mid-year. It's perfectly fine to do so. You would just have what I like to refer to as a fiscal year rather than a calendar year. So, again, I'll bring that spreadsheet up here in just a moment. So again, don't forget to watch the prerequisites by scrolling down in the list and then come back to this video. So on the screen now is my calendar year 2024 budget. Now, when I say that we're going to spend our money in advance, what we really mean is we're putting it on the spreadsheet, and then we're going to deduct from the cells that you see on the spreadsheet as you spend the money. So what I do is I start with column N over on the far right of the screen, and you can see numbers for all the different categories that are on the left. Remember in my previous episode I talked about food, gas, electric, cell, internet, property taxes, condo association fees, car insurance, car insurance and condo insurance. And then remember I may fund my Roth IRA, so I have a line item for that. And then I have fun and other, and I have 2 line items of fun 1 and 2. I'm not sure why it says 2 and 3, that's okay though. It should be really just my 2 line items for fun. And then I've got savings down below that. So what you do is you build the macro so that it takes line number 6, for example, that says food, and all of the cells then to the right of that in columns B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. You build the macro in column N, so that 6240 that you see the sum over here, it says the sum of B6 and M6. Well, it adds it up for you, so you don't have to do that. So when you start deducting from the buckets, it then moves that number down. So you also see that you've got January, February, March, April, May, etc. I happen to get paid 3 times in March and 3 times in August for 2024 because I get paid 26 pay periods per year. So what you do is you just put the money in the cell for that line item. So for example, for food, I know I want it to be $120 a week. 52 weeks is the 6240, right? And then you just divide it by 4 to get most of the months, the 480. But then 2 months have 720 as the line item. So what you do then, as you start spending the money, let's say we go to the grocery store and we spend maybe not 120, that's just an estimate, but let's say I overspent 150, okay, minus 480 is 330, so you put 330 in that little line item, or in that cell I should say. Then look what happens over here. So then when you look all the way down here, then all of a sudden you have a negative number down here, because I built a macro here as well that says the difference between N33 and O33, which happens to be the totals for the in and out numbers. And by the way, I didn't say that column O up here is also your income. So that 71043, remember, was the net of my paychecks. The $600 in from the cell phone reimbursement. I actually carried money from my previous budget, so you can do that. You just bring it on over. And then my estimated bonus. So all of that in my operating budget is 81,482, because you're including, remember, savings as an expense as well. Very important to do that. And so then up here, as you're spending the money, then it says 150 at the bottom, right? Because I spent that at the grocery store. But then where does it go? Well, it might go to my credit card, so I might put it up in the credit card area temporarily. But then once I move it and pay off the credit card, it goes down to the total paid down here. So what happens is all of your money up here in the top part of the spreadsheet ultimately gets filtered down into one of these buckets. It's either going to savings or being paid, like things like electric, you just pay that and it doesn't go to a credit card temporarily or anything like that. Or it might go into my savings, so this is for my short-term reserves, into my credit union savings account, etc. So you're basically spending the money and then you put it in the buckets below. Now, I also want to mention then that it may take you, let's say, a month or two or more as you're going throughout the year to build your budget. release the budget, you already have the cells built in correctly with the right dollar amounts, and you start to deduct them. So by following this model, for me, what has really worked really well is that as you clip along in your life and you're going on and you're spending money, you're having fun, you have to remember to go back to the spreadsheet every time you spend money, or it's not going to work. So save this somewhere on your computer and look at it every single week. So again, if you go to the grocery store and you spend that money, you've put it in the proper allocation. Now, in your mind, you know, in my example, when I said I spent 150 rather than 120, I don't have to visually remember that I spent more money for that week. But there's only the money in the bucket for that category that I should spend. But that doesn't mean I can't go to another bucket and take money from it. It's all netting to zero anyway, because we're looking at 12 full months. Does that make sense? So if you spend a little bit here too much or a little bit there too much, that's okay. You revisit it, and you may have to take some from some of those buckets. You can never go wrong if you remember to do that. Now, the other thing I want to say is that, remember, for me, for multiple years, as I said in the beginning of this episode, I just had income coming in and expenses going out, and it virtually net to zero, with the exception of a little bit of fun. So I did have a line item for fun, but when you're building your budget, you have to put in all your expenses first. Food, gas, electric, cell, internet, property taxes if you own a property, or your rent, any type of association fees you may have, all of your expenses, including what you may want to pay yourself as the minimum fun amount. For me, it's $40 a week, and that equals, as you can see on the far right, $20.80 per year. That's my baseline. That's my baseline that I'm saying I'm going to pay myself on the spreadsheet, that amount of money. But as you go and you go to the next year, you might want to bump that up. You also may want to bump up your spending, your saving. And now, as I mentioned a little while ago, it may be that for you, like it was for me, that you're just netting to zero with your expenses and maybe a little bit of fun. That means, remember, you're in a survival year. And there's nothing wrong with survival years, because what does a survival year give us? It gives us the skill sets that we need once the thriving years come. So because you will have practiced your survival skills for 3, 4, 5 years, for me it was 11 years, I mastered my budget for 10 or 11 years. Then once I started making a little bit more money, I knew exactly what to do with it. I filtered it into the savings line items. And every time you get a raise, you filter it back into the savings line item. And that could be, as you know, many things we've talked about. It could be short-term reserves. It could be investing. You might get to a point, and you may be doing a point right now where you're investing. I think I shared with you guys that in my budget, my taxable account, I never really opened until 2016. That's how many years it took me. 2016 minus 2005. It took me 11 years before in my budget I had enough extra money to put into a taxable account, meaning I was maxing out my Roth IRA, I was maxing out, remember, my 401k. And then in 2016 I turned those years. And then finally, after 11 years in 2016, I said, you know what? I've got extra room in my budget. And I opened up the taxable account and I started saving into the taxable account, as I talked about in one of my previous episodes. So, in closing this episode, this really is probably the most important thing that kept me on track for multiple years. For multiple years, I used this spreadsheet, and I still use this spreadsheet to this day. So I would highly encourage all of you, if you're new to personal finance, if you're just starting out, this is one of the basic building blocks that you need to get a hold of your money. And as I always say, if you don't get a hold of your money, it will get a hold of you. So thank you so much for joining me on this edition of ASMR Money Mentor. I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did,